Okay, we'll go live. So we're live. Good morning. It is Wednesday, March 13th in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, midway through crossover. And we are taking up with the hope of passing out S-247, repealing the veggie sunset and adding an important provision for small businesses. Joan, I don't know what planes you were on yesterday, but thank you for making it back here and being here this morning.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here and great that we're back. We need more flights to come into Burlington.
I know.
General comment, but
Yes.
anyway,
If I can do anything about that, I will. And Jessica, you're welcome to be part of the conversation as well, if you want to introduce yourself now for the record. And then
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm Jessica Hartley. Can you hear me?
Oh,
sorry. It looks like I just froze. I'm Jessica Hartleben. I'm the executive director of BEPC.
Great. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak in the next half hour that would like to introduce themselves now? Okay, so we have our economic development folks on the side, and we have the council.
You're lucky to have.
Thank you. Thank you. I have my little homily about how good of a job you did on Kids Code for later, but thank you for being here this morning. Because we do hope to vote on this. And I would like to keep the language relatively intact so we don't stress out Ledge Council.
correct.
And because the House can't fix any minor
Sure.
thing. Hello, Representative Hingle. Are you here for veggie?
I am not. I was here for Senator Brock's signature.
Okay.
If he's not busy.
Okay, well, now that we have a full committee, and folks, Senator Clarkson is home with some kind of stomach bug. There are disinfectant wipes here. We did disinfect her area. Okay. None of us can afford to sit. And
I think it's sadly a little late. Nice idea, but it's a little late.
Well, I certainly don't want to be thrown up on my pregnant, so that's we are taking it seriously. Anyhow, let's get through the language. Everyone should have a copy of the language that's roughly agreed upon, that started in the House but never made it anywhere, that Rick's drafted. We're looking at 1.1 of 708. So you have that. I have one copy that I can pass around of Kathy's very glowing statement about her support of this concept. And by glowing, I mean one sentence, and she's traveling, and we appreciate that. And then you have Joan's handout. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Goldstein.
Thank you very much. For the record, Joan Goldstein, Commissioner, Department of Economic Development. I'm happy to be here, and maybe just to recap a bit before the break, we presented a little bit about the picture of what people earn in Vermont, and overwhelmingly, it's like 71% of the W-2s were for W-2s of less than $50,000. 23% were between 50 and 100, and 6% were over 100,000. So we want to change that pie chart.
Yeah.
And veggie is one way to do it. How else would we do it? In terms of getting people to earn more money, is to provide opportunities for Vermonters where they could earn a much more livable wage. So we definitely want to extend veggie, and thank you for the work done so far on the elimination of the sunset, because we all agree we need incentives to make this happen. So why have sunset?
Yeah.
And
there's no disagreement at this point on eliminating the sunset.
Correct. It's great.
Yeah.
The new twist that we're adding is something called forgivable loan. And so the idea would be, businesses talk about needing the money up front, but the state doesn't really want to risk by giving money up front. That's what used to happen before. Veggie, we used to give money up front and then you had a reclaim. So in this scenario.
Do you want to pause on what we did?
Well, just struck my mind, since this is moving.
Yeah.
If we put in forgivable loans, is that going to get incentive finance?
I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't know,
I'm
actually.
actually not going.
Yeah.
I just don't know what it would do.
I think what it
I don't
would,
want to have,
think it would.
I would too.
I think it would, because it's foregone tax revenue now.
Correct.
So it wouldn't be
It's forgiven.
taxable, and it would
Correct.
have an impact, and so,
Right.
yeah, and I'm okay with that. You are.
And the other addition is that we do not ask for an appropriation for VEPC, it's just the personnel. in this scenario, we're asking for a $350,000 appropriation
Oh, that's right.
to
So
allow for loan loss reserves for Vita in the case where they're taking on more risk. There might be a startup that doesn't have that much collateral, as an example, and so they wanted that security of having a cushion in case there are
So
more.
just to be
losses.
clear, the appropriation is in the governor's budget. I don't see it in the bill. Is it in the bill?
I think it's just in the budget, but
Okay,
bear with me.
it's implied,
That you might wanna talk to appropriations,
right?
sure, action,
Right,
cause.
Yeah,
right.
things
It
are
is, yeah,
yeah,
it is in the budget. We testified in Senator Probst about it and
okay.
explained it just briefly. and she,
Okay.
You know,
So if it's on her radar, that's okay. I don't think what we pass out would automatically get sent to a pros because the appropriation isn't referenced in the language we're looking at unless we want.
unless you wanna put it in there.
Can't do the forgivable loans, so you've got the backup money.
Right,
So if they don't do it this year, they might, there's other things funded. They'll put it in, but they won't fund it until we've got the money.
right. Does anyone feel like it's important that we have the actual appropriation in this bill? If it's in the governor's budget?
But the governor's budget is
You
just starting.
Right, I know, yeah,
I don't know where, if it's coming
Yeah.
out of the house in
Add
there.
it this way.
Okay,
It's just
so it's
security.
referenced, yeah, and
so
then
it's
Senator
referenced.
Probst will see it
Yeah.
connected to the policy.
That would be great.
I'd like to
Well,
know what happened.
Madam Chair, may I just ask, Joan, did the House Commerce include it in their priorities in terms of
No,
what's?
one read through and it did not make their list and nor did we really talk about it after that point.
I
Okay.
would like. We put in a great deal of loss leader backup money for the internet services because they were gonna be getting loans from Veggie to tide them over till they, could go to the bond bank. I don't know that that was ever used because then the federal CUD money came in and we set up a different system. And I'm wondering if the
Hmm.
money sitting in Veggie
Hmm.
that isn't being
Vita,
used,
you mean
in
in Vita?
Vita,
Yeah.
that might
So
be
we
able to
could,
be transferred.
when it gets to finance, we could have more information and,
I've got Vita coming in anyway,
right,
so we'll just ask them for two.
great. And then by that time, Cassie could probably offer more, commentary as needed. If there's something she really can't live with
Right.
in terms of it passing the Senate. She is okay with it. I hope that circulated. There it is. But, she might have a few wording changes we can make in finance and we could maybe find a source of money that doesn't affect the budget. Nice. So Rick,
Yes,
we will need to add that appropriation.
okay. The 300, how much is it?
350.
And that's based on how many,
That ends up, so we're not changing the veggie cap, which is we can't approve any more than 10 million in any given year. So, it's, I'm trying to think about the percentage, I can't get that off the top of my head, but, like 3.5.
so would the 10 million apply to both of the
Correct,
programs?
We're not changing any.
So the combination of that
Correct.
wouldn't be more than 10 million.
Correct.
Right, because we're making changes to the Vita Farm loan program that will open it up to more people.
Right.
And it's 10 million total
Right.
of all the programs.
Does the 350 have any language around it about intent? Jessica, is that something you can email to?
I think it refers back to this, refers back to this bill because
There is a reference to.
there's a reference
risk
to it. Just,
fund.
I'd have to figure out where.
Oh, okay,
You know.
okay. I just wanna make Rick, search
Right.
for something that
Well, it's
already.
under the Commerce and Agency of Commerce and Community Development budget within Department of Economic Development. It's just a one-time ask.
It's a one-time.
It's a one-time, it's not a base.
Okay, if there's any purpose language, Jessica, that you could email to Rick, I think that's helpful.
I've only heard one ask around here that we had 2 zeros and not millions.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds like petty cash when you look at what
Right,
other bills are asking.
right. I think Senator Kitchell accepted $7,500 as negligible yesterday, but that was, she's willing to accept. Or to
that
just.
Wasn't that the
Negligible, right?
loss for the,
Some,
well, there's so many moving parts in
Right.
that.
yeah,
I'll have joint fiscal decide if it is $750 and
yeah,
then we can decide
Right.
if it's negligible.
yeah.
Just my understanding of this is that it's not intended to be spent, it's there if it's
Yes.
required to
Right.
compensate for losses.
But it's,
Correct.
it's still aligned
Oh,
with the
right,
budget.
totally
Yeah, but you're
understand,
right,
but
yeah.
that kind of changes it a little bit, and I would hope that it would be carried over, if it does go through,
Mhm.
just keep it in that
Correct.
line.
Which is kind of what Senator Combs is saying, we might.
Exactly, it's changing the
Okay.
broadband.
But where is the money coming from that we're loaning out that we're then gonna forgive? So it's
Vita,
invested, but it's
Mm.
not.
so what happens is, the reason why we like this mechanism is we're not asking for funding to fund the loans. The loans will be funded the same way they are with many other Vita programs. They go out to the market, borrow the money. They borrow money and lend it. That's their
Right,
normal.
but if you forgive the
Well, we
loan,
forgive it,
then that money is gone.
right,
So there's no return on investment to Vita. I mean, this.
there is
it will-
actually.
Okay,
So let me
because
explain
how
the
long can
mechanism.
you go
Yeah.
to the market when you're not making the money?
So what they do is they go out, they borrow the money. You'll see in the language that we ask the applicant to pay interest. Because Vita still has to pay interest on those funds.
Okay.
They pay interest only for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, if they meet their targets, the loan gets forgiven. If they don't meet their targets, they have a loan with Vita. At the inception, they have a Vita loan agreement,
Right,
which has the terms and conditions. The forgiveness will come from the tax department. In the little comparison that we sent in, we show the mechanism. At the end, normally, in the current veggie, tax will send the funds to the applicant.
right, but they've
In
already
this
paid
scenario-
those funds in. I mean, the business pays the funds to the tax department.
Correct.
If they meet their goals, the tax department sends them back the
Correct.
money. In this case, Vita's getting a loan. They're loaning the money to a business who pays interest on it.
Correct.
Okay, but if the loan is forgiven, how does Vita pay back Wall Street?
The tax department, instead of paying the applicant, will pay Vita. And that's where Vita will get the funds in order to pay that loan.
So the applicant is paying in income tax, basically?
Everything that they normally,
Okay,
yeah,
all right, and who makes sure that that balances?
so tax department will verify the payroll and verify the head count. And Vita is gonna verify that the capital investment was done, because it's what they normally do.
Right, but who decides that the money the company has paid to the tax department is going to equal or be greater than the money that the tax department is giving back to the company? I don't wanna see us get into a hole here and
There-
sunset with.
So there are conditions in here that they can't dip below their
The
payroll.
Payroll, can't,
Okay,
payroll has to
prior.
fit, right.
So it's not, I
Is the
think.
payroll tax that they're paying into the state?
Mhm,
Okay, anything they're paying into the state.
Right.
This is a payroll tax on the new employees that are hired because of the program that we're talking about as available funds, is that correct?
It doesn't go that deep, right? Under normal circumstances, it's an assumption, right? All the modeling and everything in the world.
Well,
Still-
I mean, that's the question is,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's modeling that says, if this particular small business hires 10 more employees, those 10 employees will pay a certain amount of tax based on the additional income that they get. Now, will the amount of tax that they pay, cumulatively in the 3-year period we're talking about equal the amount that has been advanced by Vita so as to be able to pay back the loan to Vita, who in turn can pay it back to where it borrowed it from?
Right,
And I'm just trying to
yeah, so
understand
it's
the
gonna
balance.
depend, it's gonna depend on whether they've created more jobs or done more capital investment. We did we looked back at current veggie programs and we applied this formula for this program. Those who hired more people, I believe, ended up doing better. And those who had more capital investment did worse under the new scenario. But in totality, we ended up paying out less if we use this new formula. Now, obviously, past is no indication of future, but it's what we could go on, right? Because in this scenario, we have a limit. You could only get, the maximum you can get is $1 million on CapEx. The maximum you can get on employment growth is 200,000. We've had veggie programs that have gotten in the millions, so 1.2 is the absolute max. A while back, I know that you often reference this, we did a little scenario about the value of one employee. And so if we're paying $5,000, it looked like over time, we're definitely making that up. You know, and it's not just payroll tax, the assumptions are usually payroll tax, income tax, sales tax, what would these new employees spend? So does tax department go and do all that gymnastics? No, they're not doing that. They're doing this based on the current statute and practice of, you know, paying out according to a certain level of rate of pay, like these have to be higher wage, or 160% of minimum or 140, depending on the area. Not everyone is entitled to veggie. You have to be in an export business like manufacturing technology. We don't just give this to any business. So yeah, it's not going to be dollar for dollar. You're going to check, make sure it's always under. But on average, when we look at, yeah,
I mean, the modeling that I recall us doing in the past were based on things like the remote worker program, where
Right.
it's pretty clear cut, because you have an
Right.
employee that you can see and measure, and you know how much
Right.
tax revenue and other kinds of revenues based on the model
right.
used there are coming in.
We did use that as a model, so we,
Okay.
5,000 per, actually, it's less than what we gave on remote worker. It's 5,000 per new job, and so,
That's what you're using for
For this
this, for
one.
this program.
yeah,
Fine.
5,000 per
And
new
as I
job.
recall, we're using, well, we actually spent
We actually-
less.
We spent less, and we also, we entitled people to more, we had 7,500 was the last.
Right, right.
So we think we're in that same ballpark, that there's return. The 20% is based on all of our previous experience with community recovery, revitalization, also the idea that 20% could usually represent a down payment for somebody, so it's not based on nothing, it's kind of based on our experience, and
So I wanna do a time check only because the biggest time constraint is making sure we let Rick go.
okay,
Add this appropriation, do whatever he needs to do, cause he's back here at 10.
okay,
So I wanna ask the committee if in the next 5 or so minutes, you have questions about the language that someone can answer or not, that we, if there's a change, we need to go to Rick.
Well, I have a question, and that is, you know, basically, as we look at, veggie, it's always been based on but-for theory.
yeah,
And I'm just wondering about the applicability of the but-for the kinds of small businesses we're talking about. You know, in the large business, it was the notion, it had to be part of the due diligence, that the business had another plan and the jobs were gonna go elsewhere. Or the investment was gonna go elsewhere unless Vermont provided
Something.
yeah. And I just wonder how applicable that is and how you would even measure that from a due diligence standpoint for the kinds of small businesses you're talking about.
it's going to be the same, but for, we're not changing the but for this program. The but for is that they wouldn't do the activity, or they would do it in a less advantageous
Right.
way for the state. And what that typically turns into is they don't necessarily say we're going to New Hampshire, they'll say, we'll have to hire people at a slower rate, right? Or we're not gonna do this, we're gonna do this in phases. And that's typically what the but-fors look like. So that same due diligence will have to occur through the VEPSI process. The way we envision this is VEPSI goes through all the other requirements, and the only additional thing is that Vita is also doing the underwriting.
And I,
But-for is the same, that was one of the.
right, I heard
concerns.
Sean Lawson gave great testimony on this, but that's a business that isn't saying, I'm leaving Vermont. They
Right.
have a great brand here. They're hiring lots of young people at great wages. They're socially invested in the community. They want to be able to grow that model at a faster rate and compete be in the market. And I think we want to reward those small businesses. When you're under 50, you are in a make or break phase where you need to get through that medium growth stage and be a real player. And you're not threatening to leave Vermont. What I don't like about the but-for test as like a hostage situation of, I'm gonna leave the state otherwise, is we have a lot of businesses committed to Vermont, but no, they don't have competitive wages. No, they can't get the best employees unless we give them help from very small,
Right.
modest pot of money.
But therein lies our problem. Veggie, it's only when you have a problem, it hits the press, but last year it was the Ivy Computer who was in the press saying we're gonna grow to 50 employees and we're giving them an extra incentive growth to grow. And I think it's that,
So I don't
Watson is
know
gonna
what hit
grow.
the press.
and we're speeding up the growth. But that is harder to explain. I mean, in this building, you will hear corporate welfare thrown out. I support the programs, but there is an image that we need.
I mean,
A more professional
right.
image that we need to.
Right. These
Put
are
out
quite
there.
tangible investments we make where we get the
Right.
return
Right.
quite quickly.
Yeah.
It's a payroll tax that comes right back to us, or it's a capital investment.
I've been supporting
Yeah.
this since day one,
Right.
but it should not be a constant fight,
Mhm.
and it will be.
Mhm. So,
Finance, well,
right.
There will be the question of return on investment
Yes.
and how we measure the return on investment and the basis of which. And if the basis is solely on a model that makes it more difficult, basis can be applied to what's happened in Veggie before. What has been the actual return on investment that you could document in a way that people can understand that if you spend $1 for this program, state can expect X number of dollars in return and when. That is much more understandable and it is based on experience. It's even better. If it's based on a model, at least it's based on something.
Yeah.
I know you've got some data.
Yeah.
Right.
Your
And
frustration.
Rick wants to say
there's a-
something. No, well, let's go probably too, but.
Yeah, so,
Let's say something.
Rick Staples and council, I have to go to Ways and Means here in 2 minutes. I just hit Magali, because what you all looking at is the House amendment of H 787 or 708, can't remember the
708.
numbers. So I sent Magali a version of S 247, that is basically the changes to 708.
Okay.
It needs work.
Mhm.
Certainly it can be worked on in the House, but that at least gives you all something to vote on or not vote on.
Yeah,
I'll be back at 10 o'clock.
yeah.
I won't have time to listen to it,
Right, no, that's
but
fine.
I'll be,
Yeah,
you at least have something. You can decide
Exactly.
to vote on it, you have something.
Right.
Print it off.
we don't have unlimited time to spend on this topic. We probably can steal another 10 or so minutes on this. My goal is to take time at the end of today's committee to vote on this, so, are we still looking at something that's relatively the same?
Yes, it's copy and paste, and
Okay,
I added the appropriate.
okay, so we have language now, so I'll, Rick, thank you. And you're already gonna be in here when we return to this, but.
We'll see.
I hope, are you here between
Ways
us?
and Means is what-
Yes,
Ish,
yes,
okay.
on my calendar.
Okay,
You'll
great,
have-
yeah,
All right, I'll be back.
and if you need to be late at
Yeah.
10, that's okay.
Okay.
So, because we'll have the Attorney General in
Okay,
first.
thank you.
So I just have a
Yeah.
process question.
Yeah,
Because I do have a fair amount of questions.
okay,
So I can maybe do those in the hall or ask you, but
no, we have 10 minutes and you haven't had the floor, so.
okay, so are we going to have the sunset language in a separate bill?
No, it's the same,
Same
so the same bill will have the sun.
Would we be able to
Okay.
do the sunset and not do the rest of it? Would that be an option?
That is an option.
That's what we've done before.
Here's the latest of what Rick is saying, is has everything combined.
Okay.
If that is an option, I think what I find compelling that we're hearing is that if it doesn't come out of our committee, this new forgivable loan program, I don't know who will add it because it's our jurisdiction. And we have heard for years, and I think you said it eloquently yesterday, that this program doesn't work for small businesses. It's a lot of reporting, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of work for very little money, right? I mean, it's $5,000 per employee, which they don't have a grant manager or somebody, you know, in HR who have all day to devote to this. They're smaller businesses. So,
Was it 50% of our businesses have less than 5 employees?
yeah, I
It's
mean,
a
that
huge
sounds.
percentage.
Yeah,
of
right.
Businesses. are
Right,
very
so it's called corporate welfare because it only works for our biggest employers. And for years, we've heard in this committee that a Lawson's type of business would be the perfect candidate for this, but they
Lawson
don't
had a
have.
rented, we did
Yeah,
so much for
Yeah.
the local distilleries.
right.
Yeah.
I think my last
Apologize.
pass through this committee, we did a lot with, shipping and moving and.
Right.
Uh,
And
We've
frankly,
done a lot to
the
support
value
not just
those
financial.
businesses give to our state intangibly in the brand. I mean, Lawson's is now,
Lawson's
you know,
great.
national
Yeah,
competitive. So I'm not trying to sort of wax poetic, but I would like us to take an up or down vote on this language.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's gonna make it elsewhere.
Okay, so I would just like to understand.
Yes, so go,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's time,
Great.
you have the floor.
Okay, I'll go quick. So, page 1, line 16. We're deleting sharing a portion of the revenue with the business. I just wonder what that means.
Yeah, I didn't delete that. I think that was Rick's changes, so
Darn.
Okay.
Okay.
you know, we're fine, because that's in effect what we're doing.
So
Okay,
let's
so
circle
that's
it,
existing.
Yeah.
let's circle it
That's
and
existing language.
we'll try to steal 15 minutes with Rick.
Yeah.
Okay,
At the end of
Okay.
today
Yeah,
to ask that
Okay.
question.
the underline would really be the new suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I kind of care about both, but, okay, so.
Can I
page
pause for
two-
a second? Do people have lunch commitments? What is,
Yes, I
is
think I
it
have
something you could be late to?
No, I have,
Okay.
I have money chairs.
You have money shares today? Okay.
I
so-
don't have ethics, I'm not sure. I don't
I think
we're
we got
gonna
moved, yeah.
Think-
Okay, so, yeah, so page 2. So
Mhm.
keep going.
What's next?
Okay, so on line 14, so award period is 3 years instead of 5 years.
Correct,
So I thought the regular veggie program was not changing.
right, that was the one thing, that we originally started out saying 3 years was a more realistic, and if we had it for the forgivable loan, why wouldn't we have it for the existing?
Oh, so that's a big change.
It's a big change. I don't know that it is unaligned with our intent, right? I mean, 3 years is a shorter time for them to show the growth.
It's
We're not
also
giving
less
them
money.
5 years. It's like a tip. We're giving them a shorter amount of time to
Yeah.
improve their.
It might not be as successful.
I mean, they're kind of
Okay.
showing this is what we want to do at the
Right.
immediate. Like
Exactly.
it's fairly immediate. That's like.
Okay, so,
shorten the length, was there a particular reason for that?
Well, typically, going out 5 years on a projection is tough for a business, a lot will happen.
Mhm.
So we thought 3 years is a more realistic, it's more actual.
I think with all of the financial and natural disasters we faced in recent years, it's fair to say we don't, let's look at 3 years instead of.
but I thought the longer period allowed the business to have a couple of years that weren't as good and then catch up
They do
and still
still
be
have that.
eligible for the money
They still have a grace period, we did not get rid of the grace period, they have a 2-year grace period.
on top of the 5, on top of the 3.
Yeah,
So I would think you'd want the language to still include 5, just so that we could pay out over 5.
Do you want it to say up to 5 years? And leave it to the discretion of.
Well, can I just say that if you're,
I don't know enough about mechanics.
you're gonna
Okay.
be paying out over 9 years if you keep it at 5.
Okay, because of
The
the
work period.
extension.
Because of the period, right, and so that was the reason that we wanted to shorten it from 5 years down to 3, because then you would be able to pay out
The
over a
third year.
shorter period of time versus paying out over, if it's a 5-year period now, the regular veggie pays out over 9 years. Because of the way that it takes tax almost 18 months to true up the payroll, so those businesses aren't getting that money.
it's simple,
Yeah, that's
Right.
interesting. It seems like, I mean, if I were in charge of this program, I would want there to be somewhere showing that I could pay out whatever the longest term would be.
Yeah.
Just to make it clean that those payments are authorized.
I mean, I'm getting concerned because I'm a supporter and I think I know how this works. but I don't understand this. And maybe it's my visual learning thing. I need something like this maybe, tell, you know,
Okay,
because we
so.
get in trouble public image
Mhm.
because we get,
It's not clear.
it's not clear and it doesn't, we got.
Why-
Well, we also
I
want
want-
consistency
Okay.
between the forgivable
Okay.
loan and the existing, because why
I
would you
want,
have?
let's,
I think
Figure
the
it out.
existing one, if we're paying out 9 years, I would have 9 years just somewhere
so
in this statute.
Senator
Oh,
Harrison is
it's
our
in there
reader,
already.
which is good.
Is
We
it
need
there?
someone who reads all the language. Why don't you get through
Okay,
all of your concerns and we will vote on this on Friday.
okay, so, I had circled non-owner employees, but that's, I do know now what that means, that they don't own 10%. Something I'd like to suggest, the one thing I wanna suggest,
Yeah.
is that co-ops or cooperative
Yeah, employee owned.
organizations, employee owned, that they get extra points. And I think that because they can't leave the state, because
Mhm.
they're rooted in the community and area they can't be, bought up by an
Yeah,
outside corporation, I think they deserve, points for that.
I kind of spoke
We
over
get-
you, but do you only mean employee owned or cooperatively owned, like member owned business?
I mean, all of those,
Like all co-op.
there's a,
The only.
there's a,
Yeah.
I mean,
So those are
There's a
like member
collection
owned or
of
those employee owned, so
Right.
both.
right,
Do you want to
and
add that
I think there's
to,
other, there's
Mhm.
other entities that have that
Well,
same,
where are you adding that location?
I don't know.
Oh, I
because
think
I'm
okay.
not on this one.
Maybe
But,
under enhanced.
but-
something.
Okay.
But basically, what, in the criteria, you must have a criteria or a scoring.
There's a section about enhanced incentive, which have to do with either green
Okay,
or if you're in a disadvantaged area.
Great,
okay,
So we
perfectly.
can-
okay, so we
Yeah,
can,
great, so there's
I'll
no
keep-
disagreement with that
No.
idea right now,
great.
Yeah.
just I'm asking. Looking,
And that's
okay,
consistent with our
Yeah.
feds in,
yeah,
Southern.
great, I think that's a good.
Cool. So on page 3, the underlined, average annual unemployment, page 3, line 7, average annual unemployment rate greater than the average. And then would the, paragraphs A and B, is that all of the state that is not in Chittenden County?
That is a determination by the labor market area that Department of Labor puts together, LMI, the Labor Market Information Group. So it's the whole state, but so for example, Chittenden, I think Chittenden and Franklin are one labor market area, they would not be getting an advantaged rate,
But
if you will.
Okay,
advantage
okay,
rate though,
so it's
which
Chittenden.
was strange.
It's strange.
Ivy
Right,
it was getting a special advantage. It was in Waterbury, which is a growing bedroom community. But the labor market put it in with
Morrisville,
Morrisville.
exactly.
And so it was disadvantaged, even though the town, I'd love to know where Stowe is in that, probably in the same area, the same road. But it's a,
But still might have wealth and still unemployment.
well, that's it, no,
People not
the
making.
place
that
is
money
going
there.
in Waterbury, which is the
Mhm.
growth area in Washington County right now. But the labor market went up to Morrisville,
Mhm,
and so there were enough
right,
lower income disadvantaged areas in
Right.
there. That, and I bet Stowe is in there, cause it's on the same road,
Mhm.
and so you get that kind of,
mhm, so it's a little funny, but
it's a little.
probably-
That's a lot funny areas where the Franklin County is considered part of Chittenden County, and you think of Enosburg and Richford and Sheldon, there's no
Right.
Yeah,
no
right,
comparison.
so there's winners and losers, but we don't have a better
Moving on to
system.
Correct, it's like we figure labor
Yeah.
market, this is what they do.
Yeah,
or the
Right.
people that you.
And that's the federal
it's
government?
commute, it's
Does the
commute.
labor market?
Exactly.
You can go to
Right.
Well, we
you go
can
to
do it,
Waterbury and work and live in Morrisville, and a lot of people do. Very few people that work in Stowe can live in Stowe,
Correct.
so there's a lot of, at
Mhm.
Sugar Bush Valley, yep.
So that's the
We have
state,
a long
state
career.
Department of Labor does.
Yeah, the,
So that can be on our
Not
list
yet.
when we talk to them.
Always, yeah.
Compared
In case we run out of
to
things to talk
in
about.
Rush hour in most
Okay.
other states. They commute
Yeah.
from Waterbury to
That's
Burlington is a piece of cake. I mean, we
It's
don't
pretty.
have 6 lanes of 80-mile-an-hour traffic.
Okay, how close are we to your?
Okay, page 4.
Okay.
New language at the top. Qualifying business that maintains a minimum the same number of full-time employees. What, I don't understand what that means.
Oh, the first,
I mean, I know what it means, but why is it there?
Well, we don't want them to, for example, apply for a capital investment, but then lay off people.
this is the but for,
Okay.
they have to go above the payroll they had before they got it.
Okay. So, and presumably the same pay for the.
Yeah, in other words, you're gonna measure, we don't want payroll dollar value to decrease, we don't want the headcount to decrease. If they're
I
not,
might wanna just say the same payroll,
But you know,
we have
that,
that somewhere else.
Okay.
well, I guess what we're saying is we are not going to fund businesses for capital investments that would make them more efficient, i.e. having fewer people, but they're more efficient businesses. That could work against us if that's the only criteria.
That's interesting.
It's not really the only criteria, I understand what you're saying, and many businesses tell us that they don't decrease the number of headcount, it's that the headcount is doing different work. Because the machines are more sophisticated, there's more training that's
Yes.
necessary. They may not grow their payroll or grow their headcount, and we appreciate that, and that's why we want to allow either capital investment or,
We have to
Payroll.
do something. We did a special thing for, is it Wiedemann
yeah,
in,
that was special.
in Franklin County, because they're an international company and they had to compete and they
Yeah.
had to show.
Okay.
And I think in the end, they
Yeah.
did end up with a fewer employees. But they had been chosen as a site, they weren't shut down. We
Right.
did lose 243
Same
jobs.
Yeah,
Our,
220.
right, so the most precious resource we have this week is our ledge council, our JFO staff, who have elsewhere to be if we're delaying them, so what I wanna do is get all of these notes on the record and take until Friday to have conversation
Okay,
that clarify all these things, and,
so I can just rush through myself.
yeah,
Okay, so qualifying business shall only apply to, same, page,
Mhm.
page 4, line 4. The qualifying business only applies to forgivable loan applicants. And means a business that has 50 or fewer full-time employees. I would have thought that we would also have a qualifying business for the regular veggie category.
it is, in other words, we're not changing, this is
Right,
just
that's
a
existing
change, like
language.
in other words, they're not a qualifying business per se, they apply. And there are guidelines within VEPSI that show
Yeah.
it can't be in a limited local market. You know, there are all these, they have to pay X amount of wage for it to be included as target.
that's a good Rick question for
Yeah.
where the existing
Okay.
language
It's
is.
where the
that
existing-
it
Okay,
doesn't sub-
And I can just zoom through. Okay, so page 5, the 2 years, that's, you have 2 instead of 4. And I think 2 actually means 3, so let's look at that on another page, let's keep going. On page 6, okay, I'm sorry, page 7.
the 5 to 3 change tracks to this
3-year
this
adjustment.
change. Yeah, but it says the first year and 2 years immediately following, so that's 3 years.
Right, but then it's weird later on.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanna make
So-
sure I understood that section because that has to change if the 5 years to 3 years changes. The
Yeah.
utilization period has to go down.
Yes.
So
So,
then,
and depends how you define utilization, if they're getting paid 9 years or 5 years, whichever, I would call that utilization.
they're not getting paid all the,
Or getting reimbursed.
that's the 5-year to 3-year is how many years they're getting paid over versus how many at the time that it takes to true everything up.
Right, but that's 5 to 9 years, aren't they getting paid through the 9 years?
They're
That's
getting
a-
paid for it, but the meeting and maintaining of targets is only for the 5 years, and we're reducing that to 3.
No, I understand, but just activity is occurring during the 9 years, I guess is.
Why don't you show us the next
Okay.
bit that you're.
Yeah, okay, so on page 7, I think that's an easy one. The capital investment, is a new, use of the funds.
It's not new, they right now, have that capability in regular veggie. They set capital investment or job creation activity.
Okay. Okay, I thought veggie was all jobs. Okay, that's great. And then just this, a question in the but for,
Okay.
so we don't even need to answer it, just, I think on page 8. So, line 7.
Yeah.
Would occur in a significantly different manner. So that means, it would occur later than it otherwise would occur with the help of the
Right.
state.
Later
So-
or a diminished amount.
Yeah, so at some point, we might just wanna put the time, put that in here, like significantly different manner, to me, doesn't automatically mean time. It doesn't
It
mean
doesn't have
earlier.
to, and it doesn't
Right,
have
but
to.
I bet it often does.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to have that, I would put that language in.
I don't, you heard from Sean Lawson
Right.
that occurring in a significantly different manner to him was growing his business in a completely different
Yeah,
direction.
I'm not saying delete that, I'm
Yeah.
saying add the word time somewhere, like, or
As a requirement.
earlier.
Manner,
No,
different manner or
as
timeframe.
an option.
As an option.
That's
okay.
included, and not even a C, or you could put it as a C, but since that's the way.
Let's
Okay.
make that a Rick conversation.
Sure.
If you wanna propose something that says a time frame that's different or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that time should be a criteria,
Mhm.
because something happening earlier rather than later, there is an economic benefit to that.
I guess to me, it's captured in significantly different
Right.
manner, but if you don't feel like that, that's a ledge council question.
I really think if this runs up against any kind of pushback in the Senate and probably in the legislature.
Mhm.
This is all adding stuff to stuff that's there and changing things.
Well, that's existing language.
I know, but what we really need is a chart that says veggie, you get this and less this and that. And the new proposal is this and this. We've got,
We have the
There's a
you've
little
start.
bit
got
of the
that,
side
yeah,
by
you've
side.
got a little bit of that. But what we're talking about is traditional veggie.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it veggie light. But traditional veggie, this is what happens. You get this, and if you do this within this time, or if you do it. But something, because reading all of this out of context. And it's a very complicated, it isn't that complicated, but it sounds complicated. Just makes it difficult to understand.
So we'll
Because
work on the
we're-
chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
When I,
does-
yeah, when I get to date.
And,
Yeah,
and
where
we
does
don't
this-
have to change that time thing, I
Okay,
just think it would be
yeah.
better.
Clarifying, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's that too, is
Okay.
that, to me, it's a ledge council question of,
One of the, part of it is, Ledge Council, part of it is understanding of members who aren't deeply involved in
right,
this.
and that's our job,
And
but we have to end this
one
conversation.
question would be whether or not to simply call the new program small business section.
Small business,
Yeah.
forgivable loan, that's what we had called it.
Okay.
That's
Small
focused on, in other words, what
Yeah.
this really is and the purpose of
Okay.
it is explained, I think, a lot better.
Yeah, veggie light, just,
You know,
Now I wanna do something about like small vegetables, which is. But anyway.
low calorie.
Baby veggies. Anyhow, so on that
Yes.
list,
You want me to,
oh, do you have more?
yes, but
Oh, okay, I'm
I'll,
sorry.
I'll limit it to one item.
No, get them all out, just look,
Okay.
we're not saying anything
Okay.
about them, just
Okay.
say them on the record.
Okay,
It's good to have.
Yeah,
page 9, line 15, calculate the.
I don't know when you have time to read all of this. but-
Share. Well,
Okay, sorry, go on.
I'm on that board now, so.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
She's been on the receiving end
Yeah.
of these things and having to understand what we
So-
say.
We deleted growth. And we just said benefit, I think it means jobs, but you don't need to answer that now, but I just wanna clarify that. And then. On page 12. The new language in the first 3 lines. My question is before or after the economic activity, again, you don't need to answer it now.
You mean the verification
Yes,
of the subsection?
What?
I'm sorry, page 12, the first 3 lines,
Okay.
which is the important part, where the Department of Taxes pays. VITA for the full amount of the
Mhm.
loan, you just.
And that
The
refers
end.
back to page 10, where they're
Mhm.
demonstrating the full qualification.
So it probably is
It's
after
at
that.
the end, yeah,
Yeah.
at the end of the 3 year.
Okay, thanks. And then when we take the years, it gets confusing. So on page 13,
Well, it's interesting, I circled
We
page
call-
12, line 18, because I thought that's what you were,
is that the,
that's the first.
well, the 1 year ends up being 2 years because you get an extra year. So let's skip ahead to page 14. So,
Here's what I'm gonna ask for by Friday, between our folks on the admin side. Can you get us a timeline change?
Oh,
Visualization.
that should show like,
Yeah, before it was
Commencement
9
date.
years and here's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened, now it's
Okay.
gonna take 7 years and here's what happens. So that we can help people visualize what it means to go from 5 years to 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm having trouble visualizing because we're making changes out of context, out of the whole bill.
Mhm.
And we're making changes to regular veggie, I think. And then we're adding this new program. I think the new program is quite understandable because we're gonna give you,
Right.
once we figure out how we're gonna get the money.
right,
But all these changes
yeah,
are, I can't explain.
Mm.
And I know at least one person in
Right.
finance is going to,
To be fair to Joan and others, it's not like bolded, but they're saying original is 5, proposed is 3, like. They're trying to help us work through the proposed changes. So we do wanna get to the point where we say, we understand them and we feel good about them enough to explain to our colleagues. But I don't think we can say it's like too much change, it's like
no,
we
I'm
wanna
not saying
just
there's too much
visualize it.
change. I'm saying,
don't
We
mess with the
need-
original program.
no, I think to explain it, we need a longer chart, It was 3 years, we're changing, 5 years, we're changing it to 3 because, and that's in this language somewhere. But it takes a long time to pull it out and figure it out.
Yeah,
The 3 change, why are you doing those
Right.
4 changes in there?
right,
Cause this program is fine, that's for the less than
Mhm.
50 employees, which is
Okay.
most Vermont businesses. And then this one, why are you making those changes? Just in simple language. So
Mhm.
at least one
Okay.
member of my committee can understand.
Right.
I can explain. it.
right, so we have until Friday to get visuals and charts that help us. They can probably be refined after Friday for finance and approach and the floor.
Right.
But I know that you tried here,
Yeah.
and so all credit to whoever did this. They're not like a graphic artist, so if someone in the administration can help bold things or just.
and add things,
And
actually, and just explain the year. So then on page 14, so this isn't a new thing, but on the line 11 is what I was looking at, and so it says for award year 2 by 1 year. But I think award year 2 already means 2 years, so I think that's gonna be 3 years total, but I don't
So
know.
let's flag that.
That is really not,
Okay, we'll flag it. It sounds maybe a ledge council thing, but we'll flag it and
Yeah.
understand it better.
yeah,
Yeah,
because, okay, and that's all I have.
Yay, okay.
this, I'm looking at this box that says commitment period. And we're going from 5 years to 3 years.
Right.
But I don't understand why. We're just like making it easier. Businesses only have to meet their targets for 3 years instead of 5. Why? I mean, that's,
Well, businesses aren't compelled to have to put in 5 years. It's just that their projections can go up to 5 years. They have 5 years where they could earn an incentive. Many of them only put in 3 years anyway, so they're not compelled to do 5 years, but we
Okay.
wanted some consistency
So right
between both
now-
options.
when I apply, I have to give you a projection for what the growth is going
Right.
to be. And the norm now is 5 years.
You have up to 5 years. You don't have to put in a full 5 years.
So now it's up to 3 years.
Right,
So I could put in 1 year's projection.
but they're only gonna be paid out a third of that incentive over the payout period. That's why, it's like,
Okay, so what is the payout period?
it would be reduced to, 5. It would go from 9 to 5 years.
So they say, okay, if you give me this money, I'm gonna hire 10 employees the first year.
Right.
So,
But if they have less targets, they're gonna get less money because the activity isn't gonna be as fruitful for them.
I think. But why are we taking that to 3 years? I mean, you don't. have
Only
to-
because the forgivable loan is going to 3 years. We figured, how do you have inconsistent projections for, depending on the option that you take?
So we're gonna have to move on.
Mhm.
You will give us at least 45 minutes on Friday.
Okay.
And in between, you know,
Yeah.
there's work that needs to happen, some better visualization and explanation of the intent of these things. And Senator Harrison is gonna talk to you all about things where she
Yeah.
may have questions or want changes, and other areas where we've agreed that we can look at changes, just copy me and email Rick.
Yeah, and just one little comment is if the, I can see where you want a 5-year program and a 3-year program, because I think for some businesses, 5 years would be helpful.
Correct.
So
That's true.
I would be,
We might be back to the saying up to 5 years because it could
Yeah.
depend on the industry.
right.
So that is one thing we will consider. Thanks so much, Joan.
Thank you.
Just a comment, I realize we're in trouble. But I share some of the concerns that Senator Cummings had. We gotta explain this in finance. We don't totally understand it. Which I don't right now, quite frankly,
Okay.
even though I've been a supporter. I don't wanna go fast on something that I don't
We're-
understand.
What you have between now and Friday to better understand anything you don't understand. I'm finding the explanations we're getting pretty clear. If people want additional testimony on Friday to understand, now is the time to ask.
Yeah, I
Well, you
don't,
said we will have 45 minutes.
yeah,
At least.
I
Okay.
just need to be able to visualize why, just to say to make it consistent, why don't we make the loan 5 years? I mean,
Okay.
Right.
why? Because those are the questions. I mean, this is money, this is state money. You have to be able to give very clear explanations for why you're making this changes, not just, well, it seemed like a good idea.
Mhm. Why, I'm gonna add one more request, and it doesn't have to be by Friday, it could be for finance and onward, is a scenario. You're a business of this size. Here's your 1-page case study of how this helps you and what the payback period looks like.
That would be
And
very
preferably something you've already done.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
some of the
that one of the
past,
questions would be, and all of this, we certainly in the back of my mind, is some businesses think they can grow faster depending on the nature of business. Other businesses are gonna grow more slowly, but they're gonna grow in terms of the number of jobs that might be added. And that's why I think we had 5 in the first place in the original veggie program.
Give them time.
So
The reason for
I'm
the change escapes me right now.
leaning toward up to 5 and leaving it up to your discretion, because industries can be different, the world can be different. We're gonna have to move on. Thanks so much,
Okay,
Joe and
thank you so
Jessica.
much.
We are going into basic needs budget. And thank you, Damien, for your patience. I hope you were able to do something.
Sure.
Right?
When-
So
Afternoon and evening.
this could be short. Who wants to get in the witness chair? I will, but why not Damien, you get in the witness chair?
They're all running, you get that industry.
Just
It's an even comfortable.
giving my other committee assistants an update on where I am.
Yes, yeah,
I'm triple scheduled this morning, so.
Cool.
yeah. I'm gonna preface this by saying what I wanna look at is I think we're all pretty comfortable with what was already in the bill, some minor technical changes. We got a lot of questions about those. I put a proposal on the table that we do a biannual assessment of how far away our state funded wages are from the basic needs, livable wage, or the basic needs calculation. JFO has told us in no uncertain terms that they cannot add that work to their plate without sacrificing something else that, you know, is important work. So we do not have that option. I just was able to ask Damien if he could send the language to the auditor's office to see if this is something they would be willing and able to do. And so we are not going to likely resolve this today because we need to give them a couple days to consider that. So this will be a relatively quick vote if we have to let go of the idea entirely by Friday. But right now, Damien, in addition to whatever else you wanted to show us, I'd like to look at the language you came up with there. And we would mentally be replacing, auditor with from JFO to auditor. Does that, do you need anything that do you wanna go into that?
Unless the committee wants to hear anything else on that, I'm not sure if I have anything to add, like you said.
Does the committee need anything from JFO on this? We're also not voting on it today, given that. Why don't we let you go, Pat? Thank you for finding out what the internal issues would be of your.
I guess just one question, would we ever consult with somebody, with a company to do this calculation? Would it be helpful to have an estimated dollar amount of what it would cost?
I think here, so I'll let Pat speak for JFO, and I might be speaking out of turn, but one of the issues is getting all of the agencies to give this information about everyone they contract with and everyone that they pay as a designated agency. And I think the further away you get from the administration, the harder it is to get that. So it would take a lot of political time and capital for JFO to get that. The auditor's office, it would probably still take them that same time and political capital. It's also kind of part of their job to make sure that they get things from.
Oh, so it's
from the
actually
government.
acquiring the data, not analyzing it, that's the issue.
So I should introduce
Yeah,
myself.
sorry.
I'm Pat to join fiscal office. So I guess for a little context, exercises like this have been attempted in the past by our office. I actually spoke to Joyce about some previous sort of iterations of this. And yeah, there is a lot of difficulty in getting the wage data from all these various agencies. That our office has to enter into MOUs. We may get the data and then the agency immediately wants us to delete it.
Oh,
So there's definitely issues with acquiring it. When you're talking about the scope of this report, that's just a lot of different agencies that we have to be working with. So there's a big logistical challenge for us on that front.
okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Senator Clarkson?
So maybe it's something to work on and either add later somehow in the House or work on for next year.
I do we'll give the auditor's office time to consider it because it's a quick vote whenever we take it. So we'll just look at the language and see if we agree with the language, if we've replaced JFO with auditor's office, and with that, we'll let Pat.
I'll just say,
Okay.
while you guys talk about this.
Okay, so I'm gonna share the language on the screen because I
Yeah.
have not provided the committee with the
Fine.
language ahead of time. So this is language that because this was drafted before this discussion about moving it to the auditors occurred, it still says joint fiscal office. And it's drafted in the actual basic needs budget statute. If we moved it to the auditor's office, we move it to a different section. But what it provides is on or before January 15th, the beginning of each legislative biennium, you get a report on the number of temporary, limited service and permanent state employees earning less than the livable wage, the total number of state employees earning less than the livable wage. And then the third one, which is really by far the biggest ask, the number of employees performing work funded by the state that are earning less than livable wage. And there are a couple things I want to flag there. So this is the language we discussed. One thing that if you move forward with language like this is you probably want to provide clarity on what you mean by funded by the
Yeah.
state. So you have things like choices for care, providers who provide care to individuals in their home, but who are funded by the state through the Choices for Care program. You have employees of DAs and SSAs, but you also arguably every school employee in the state is partially funded by the state because there's a state share. So you would want to be really clear as to what you're excluding and what you're including here.
Yeah.
And that's the granularity that I don't have at this
Mhm.
point. So if you do want to include number 3 and not just 1 and 2, which is, it's still 1 and 2 is still a ton of data. I don't want to make it sound like this isn't a heavy lift by
Yeah.
itself. But 1 and 2 is a discrete area, even though we're talking about sifting through 7,000 employees.
Right.
But number 3 is the one where you need to really be specific about what data it is you're
Right.
looking for, because otherwise you're looking at potentially tens of thousands of
Yeah.
employees through hundreds, if not thousands, of different employment.
Yeah. I do believe our intent was to narrow this.
Yeah.
You know, so something like designated agencies or private work funded primarily by the state, which may not help us, but if there's a percentage we can add or clarification.
I mean, I'm doing a cost benefit on this, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna come back that a large number of people in designated agencies and choices for care are not making a livable wage. I think anybody that has heard from any of these agencies knows that.
Right.
So we're gonna put a lot of time and effort to document that fact. But what are we gonna do with it? If our intention is we're gonna bring everybody up to I mean, is that possible? Or is it just there
Yeah.
to
Well,
rub our
let's,
face in the fact that we aren't paying as well as probably global foundries?
let's use the mental exercise right now. Let's say we're just limiting it to designated agencies. Is that a defined?
That is more defined, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, designated agencies, specialized service agencies,
Right.
SSAs.
Yeah.
You know, those two are definitely more defined.
Yeah.
We've had language in the budget before, attached to, funding increases
Mhm.
that has specified wages that we expect to be paid.
Right.
I don't know what the follow-up was
Mhm.
on that in the past. I wasn't involved in drafting or
Right.
following up on language,
Right.
but so those are definitely more discrete groups.
Right.
If that's what you're concerned about,
Yeah.
then that's
I think that is what we generally talk about. You know, when I hear appropriations say we're level funding agencies that are continuing to do critical state work, we have to look and reflect on how much that gap is widening. And how many people we're outsourcing work to that are now no longer making anything close to a livable wage. I think that has policy implications, because we're asking people to continually do more with less, and they come back to us and say, we simply cannot anymore. So I would propose that we limit that third section to the DAs and SSAs. And
So DAs are like
designated empowered
HCRS, okay, and then what's,
Washington County Mental Health.
then what's the other?
Um,
SSAs, specialized service agencies. And I couldn't tell you who those are, but I can ask my colleagues who work on
I think it's like
that area.
helping people with disabilities get jobs, right? Like,
I don't wanna do this. I think,
okay,
I mean, it's gonna turn into a guilt thing, and we already know there's a problem there. We already know that we have not funded, and, I mean, 10 years ago, they came in and showed us if we had funded the designated agencies at the same rate we funded state employees, where they'd be paid, what they'd be getting done now. We don't do it because we're making choices with where we spend the money. I don't know that we need to put staff through all kinds of documenting that when we know there's a problem.
we can't quantify the
Well, and we do have a lot of new people too.
problem, yeah.
So,
I just think
it does seem like it would be a lot of work.
it's a lot of work for what, and I mean, staff is already overworked, understaffed. I just don't think this is where I want them to ask them to spend their summer.
The auditor's
If
office.
we call the designated agencies, they could tell us very quickly how many of their people. And what did we come in with as a livable wage?
But I guess, do we have an obligation to, so it's my intern Zoe, who just found parking. And who sit here. I'd be happy to hear from everybody about whether or not we do this. Currently, we don't quantify this regularly. We have recollections of times when we realized how wide the gap is getting, but I think with recent inflation, the gap gets wider and wider, and when we look at the basic needs budget, why are we doing that, period? If we're not then reflecting on government services we pay for that we think are critical.
And we are a major employer in the state. I mean, I see value in this data. Just a detailed thing, I think the deadline should be December 15th instead of January 15th. Did we
January.
talk about that?
January 15th aligned with the basic needs budget report. You won't know the livable wage before.
Oh, well, then maybe we should,
I think
Is it
it's
too late to
because
change
of
that?
wage, I think we have to have the year to look back.
but they're not doing it in 2 weeks.
No, I know, I wanted December 15th to become the new norm for everything,
Right,
it's
right.
not yet, so I just don't know if
Well,
the implication of that,
okay.
I
So
don't know.
I can't speak to the implications of moving the
Yeah.
basic needs budget report up a month earlier. But it's been at January 15th for 24 years, so
Oh, lots
You
of
could-
things have been in January.
I
right?
understand that, but I'm just saying like that's part of their workflow and I
Yeah.
would defer to them.
Senator Clarkson.
Whether it fouls up their work.
Senator Clarkson.
One of the reasons we're doing this work at all is to simplify life and make it easier for JFO to do this work. I don't think January 15th is a big deal, and that is what they asked for, and that's what they've needed. So
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, January 15th is where we should leave it.
Senator Clarkson, while we have you on video, how do you feel, if, and this is all contingent on the auditor's office coming back and saying they can take this on. If the auditor's office says they can take this on, do you want to include the highlighted language we've been looking at and limit 3 to designated agencies and SFA?
I think only if the auditor has the bandwidth to deal with it, because I
Right,
I don't think our staff this summer.
yeah,
So I
No,
think
no.
it's absolutely something we need to be cognizant of and aware of. We, 5 years ago when we did this with Tim, we addressed the designated agency salaries and we worked to improve them. And I don't know if they've kept up. That's a good question. And you know how I feel about the livable wage. Once we calculate it, I don't know why that doesn't become our minimum wage.
We gave them money several years ago to bring the wages up where no one should be making less than $11 an hour. They have a lot of people that are caretakers, that are people around up and down the mall.
Yep, we brought the designated agency salaries up quite a bit, much higher than that. I thought it was up to like at that point, I thought it was up to 13 an hour.
The
But-
one I remember was we gave a block grant and it was to get nobody making below 11. But that was the same time they were offering, could only offer 35,000 for a master's level position.
Pat,
So I know we're talking in a lot of hypotheticals right now, but I guess if the auditor's office can take this on for their benefit, you might want to consider staggering the reports. Because we'll be releasing the basic needs budget, the wage on January 15th.
Mm.
And they will need that number to be able to do
Oh, that's
Right.
the
right.
analysis.
That's right, they can't do it.
so would we align it with maybe like the fiscal year, like June
Well,
15th?
you could just do it on off years. So
Oh, I see what you're saying,
just,
okay,
you get one each year, but they're sort of staggered. That's not.
You could then move it to December
Oh, okay.
15th, just
December
11 months
15th
later.
of that year. Okay,
And then,
great,
then you get your report on December 15th.
great.
It would have to be earlier than December 15th for us to do anything with it in the Senate. The deadline, as you will recall, for second year of the biennium, drafting deadline is usually the first week of
Well,
December.
that's true, or to propose a budget or things like that, so.
So you could move it to October, November 15th.
Yeah, or December 1st.
I mean, it realistically, from a standpoint of getting
Yeah.
drafting requests, October 15th, you're more likely to actually have someone read the report
You're right,
and get back to us before the deadline,
I like that logic,
which ensures
Yeah.
that you get a
right?
product,
You have all fall to talk about what the implications.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good point. Good point, Damien.
Okay, so let's say October 15th. So we have two changes that we are,
Do you want
Contemplating.
to still have the auditor's office look at state employees or just focus on the DAs and SSAs?
I mean, the state employees are bargained for, right? Anyone captured in 1 and 2 have a bargaining unit or
No,
could we say?
temporary employees are
Oh.
not covered for bargaining
Okay.
purposes. The union has tried to get permission to organize them. but,
Okay,
uh,
so could we
they-
say non-represented employees and DAs and SSAs?
You could just say temporary,
Okay,
employees. And then, maybe total. Because that would give you a sense of if there's anyone outside of temps who are earning less.
okay. I like that as well. It just really limits the scope. We're talking about the people who get left behind and we have to hear from them individually because they don't have a lobbyist essentially in the building.
And the limited service folks. I don't know if they're covered by.
So limited service folks are folks who have, are hired for like 2 or 3 year terms.
Right.
They will, depending on their role. They're either going to be exempt employees, who are generally paid well over the minimum wage, or they'll be in the non-management unit.
Okay, so they are covered by.
They very well may be, or they're going to be some sort of exempt, sort of confidential.
Well, there's a lot of.
Yeah.
It's what I'm
Mhm.
thinking, so I would actually like to have that number, because I would even like
Temporary
to
and
know the
limited
number of
service.
Okay.
the limited service.
Yeah.
Because that,
Yeah, okay. So we've we've narrowed the scope quite a bit. I think, does anyone else have any thoughts, recommendations on the language? I think now that we've narrowed it, I'd love, Damien, if you could send this to the deputy auditor.
Oh, I already sent the original language.
Yeah, just send him the update and tell him we really tried to limit the scope because no matter who does this work,
Okay.
we wanna make sure we're getting the information that we're actually gonna
Yeah,
look at.
I'm in committee and meetings steadily
Mhm.
until this maybe 4 o'clock this
Okay.
afternoon, so
Okay.
I'll send it to him. by
Send it
the
to him,
end
then
of the day.
I will text him in the meantime, that
Yeah,
you're getting language, but we've just narrowed it a bit more. So
Yes.
with all of that, and then with the auditor's office coming back and saying, yes or no, do people want to consider this language if the auditor says that this is something they can't take take off?
yes, I think it would be helpful.
I think we have to know who's gonna do it. If the auditor can't do it, I think we have to rethink it. It's a great,
Well, okay, I guess the question on the table is, should I forward, should we, Damien and I, communicate with the auditor's office, the new language at all, to see if they can do it? That is the question. If they can't, it's not happening. But
Right.
do people want to have this further considered by the auditor?
Do you also, in terms of the request of the auditor, make the assumption they're going to do it with in-house staff as opposed to hiring
Right.
contractors and so on to do the work?
Well, they'll get back.
With a cost.
When my conversation with the deputy auditor assumed in-house. They didn't say that they would need additional funds to do this. They also needed to look at the language. So we won't vote on this until we hear from the auditor's office. This is asking the committee if they want to move forward with forwarding them the language that we've just discussed today. And
yes,
otherwise, we'll, the bill
It's-
that up.
I think it's worth finding out if they're engaged. I mean, I know Tim's interested in this issue and certainly Doug is. And I think it's worth finding out if they could do this for us by we're talking about December of 25 or October of 25.
Is that what we're talking? Just make sure, 'cause you have a new one that came out.
We'll publish the
You'll
next
publish it
one in
when?
January of 25,
Okay.
so I'll be working on it this summer.
So any objections? Okay, thank you, Damien, for working on this. Thank you, Pat, for staying.
Perfect.
I will be texting the deputy auditor because that's the fastest way. to
Right,
get
and
it.
if I can get you the language earlier, I will.
Okay.
It's just, I know my schedule is like. solid.
Okay, so
Okay.
let me recap. We've given them a new date, 11 months from the date the report is released to share this number, not 11 months, 8 months, October. We've limited state employees to temporary and limited service. And we've limited all other employees paid through state funds to designated agencies and SSA.
That's right.
Those are the changes we've made.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna communicate that to the deputy auditor by Friday. We'll have their thoughts.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, and I will get an amendment as soon as I can,
Great,
so.
okay. Well, we even get a break, everyone. Yay.
Well, for your time.
Thank you so much. So we'll take a 10-minute break. We have the Attorney General coming in at 10, so I just ask people to be